Thank you everyone for that kind welcome. And today, of course, the Women in Forum Football Forum is being held on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri Nation, and I wish to acknowledge them as the traditional owners. I would also like to pay my respects to the elders past and present and the elders from any other communities who may be here today. And in particular, thank you, Auntie Georgina, for that sincere welcome, touching on family and community. Really key messages for us in football, because that's at the heart of and the essence and the DNA of our game. And so we really appreciate you sharing that with us. And it's a real pleasure to be here before you today. Thank you very much for your attendance. I would also like to acknowledge my friend and really football's greatest supporter ever in Victoria, and that's the Honourable John Aaron. And no, it's us who should thank you, John, and we hope to be able to work closely with you and our colleagues at the FFA in not only advancing the interests of football, but of course doing our very best to ensure that we are equally attentive and focused on giving as much as we can and delivering as much as we can to both boys and girls. That's our duty, and we take that very seriously, and we thank you for your support and the need for us to collaborate. Importantly also, tomorrow we're being joined by the Federal Minister, Greg Hunt, which will be fantastic. I think Victoria have shown the leadership in terms of driving the importance of women's sport and recognising the role of women's sport in Australian communities and society. And so it's a pleasure to be able to welcome the Federal Minister here tomorrow to talk about that, and hopefully even take that leadership that's already been demonstrated in Victoria to the rest of the nation and on a federal level, given there's been advances in other states. So well done to the Victorian government, to you, Minister, and to Premier Andrews for showing that leadership. And of course, that also have to acknowledge the the recently deceased Fiona Richardson, who was a key part of driving that and has been instrumental in ensuring that Victoria and women in Victoria are being heard and respected. So, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, the only way in which this will be achieved is if we collaborate. And we all read about the challenges that football faces from time to time. Yes, we do have those challenges, but it's a natural part of our game. You know, we are deeply entrenched in each of our communities, and no two clubs or people or states are the same, which means that we have a diversity that is endemic in our people and our game. And as a result of that, when we have to come together and make decisions, like families, they're not always simple. So we do our very best to try and work that through. Often it creates complications, but it's necessary to ensure that we work through a robust process so that we can be aligned and we are able to join one another and try and advance the common interests. And I'm delighted to know that David Gallup's joining us a little bit later. He's on the plane down from Sydney as we speak, and look forward to welcoming David and participating in our forum a little bit later in our panels. The important thing for us to realise, of course, is that football doesn't exist without clubs. Clubs are where the players go, clubs are where the players play, and clubs are where the families and communities congregate for one another, with one another, and share things. A critical part of growing the game, a critical part of ensuring that women have the same opportunity as men, is ensuring that those clubs allow them to also feel comfortable and enjoy the benefits, the wonderful benefits of being part of the beautiful game, and other sports as well, of course, but we're more interested in football. But importantly, we know that because of football's natural characteristics, it lends itself to boys and girls equally. It also is the universal language. It is the language of the world, which means it also lends itself to every single community around the world, and is a key part of the multicultural society that we have here in Victoria, and a very successful one. So that is why football's role in Victorian society is important, and that's why our responsibility to lead the development and growth of women's football and girls' football is an important one for FFV. As John mentioned, as the Minister mentioned, Minister John mentioned, Wouldn't it be fabulous to get the World Cup here in 2020? I mean, wouldn't that be wonderful? Can we imagine what that will do? The impact of the Asian Cup just gave us a taste of what we can do, and it brought so much out that exists in our Victorian communities. The crowds that we hear, can you imagine what that'll do for our Matildas? Can you imagine what that'll do for football in this country? And from an FFV perspective, we're very supportive of the FFA's initiative to go for this, and of course the Victorian government and federal governments commit to making that happen, because it would just be so fantastic to be a part of that. So over the course of the next 2 days, my colleagues have assembled a group of speakers and put together some forums designed to generate outcomes for the benefit of women's football at clubs, elite pathways, leadership, and marketing, all these resourcing, relationships with government, the key elements, all the key elements that the men's game has enjoyed and taken for granted for many years. We have to proactively change that. We're becoming conscious of our unconscious bias. That's what's happening at the moment, and that's a great thing. And we need to act on it. We have the responsibility and obligation to do so. So there'll be a few presenters over the next few days. I'd like to just run through a few of those, if you don't mind. Firstly, as the Minister mentioned, the Change Our Game initiative from the Victorian government last year was groundbreaking. And he's alluded to Dr. Bridie O'Donnell, who I've had the pleasure of seeing a presentation, and I really look forward to hearing from her a little bit later, who's heading up the Change the Game initiative. In addition to that, a fellow by the name of Ben Crow, who may be known to some of you, has been credited with campaigns such as the one around David Beckham, even been at the heart of possibly Richmond's success last year, as well as recently signing a deal for the English Premier League. He'll be joining us a little bit later and talking to us in the importance of storytelling and how that engages kids, boys and girls, and inspires them and allows them to be a part of something so they can believe in it. So that'll be fabulous to have Ben here. Also, we're greatly honoured to have the CEO of Gerald Rector from the Vic Health, who has also taken an enormous leadership role in ensuring that health is at the heart of promoting participation in sport. But of course, it's a very key part of that preventative health initiative to ensure we have healthy boys and girls, not only physically, but mentally. And sport certainly has a role to play there. We also have Catherine Gill here. Now, some of you may or may not know Catherine, but what a CV and what a player she was. The second highest goal scorer of all time. At one point was the highest Matilda goal scorer of all time, until Lisa Devanna just recently passed her with that superb goal. But she's now an executive with the PFA. And the PFA have taken great steps in advancing the interests of equity, fair play and women's football, and have really should take a lot of credit for advancing the professionalism of the Matildas. And Catherine will be here to talk to us also about elite pathways and the challenges for girls being able to achieve their dreams. Also, of course, given we're playing China, it's actually the 45th anniversary of the bilateral relations between Australia and the Chinese governments ever since former Prime Minister Gough Whitlam got off the plane. And it's great to be able to celebrate and share that with them here in Melbourne. And we look forward to working more with them over the coming years. Further, it's wonderful to have Angela Pipos, who will be joining us. She's recently written a book, Breaking the Mould, which you may have heard about. Great Christmas present, from what I can understand. I haven't read it in its entirety, but it's important that it talks about the challenges of levelling the playing field and the equality challenges that we face institutionally and from a resource perspective. We're also pleased to be able to welcome Sam Al-Maliki, who's a commissioner with the Victorian Multicultural Commission. I alluded to the fact that the game lends itself to all cultures and communities and religions and faiths, and of course it does, and there's no better person to talk about that than Sam, who arrived here as a refugee himself, and of course has gone on to be an exceptionally successful person and is now giving back to his community through his involvement with the VMC. But also, when we talk about the multiculturalism in club football, it has to be led by people on the ground, people at the coalface. And we'll hear from a guy by the name of Steve Lambrakakis from Hoppers Cross Soccer Club. You'll want to hear this story, just what he's been able to achieve with his football club and how he's made it a welcoming environment for his community, which is multicultural and has men and women, funnily enough. Finally, I think, or two more people I'd like to mention. Louise Ayres, who's been recently recently become an executive at the Sports Commission, who's responsible for shifting the perception of female sport and the importance of it in Australian society. What an enormous task. Okay, so we started in Victoria and that's going well. But for someone to then take that on and try and shift the national perspectives is an enormous task, and she too will be joining us. We look forward to hearing from her as well. And of course, when I mentioned clubs a little bit earlier, well, we need pitches and we need facilities and we need change rooms. And so our colleagues from Sports Recreation Victoria will be joining us as well. It'll be Jessie Dool who'll join us today, and thanks Jessie for helping us talk through that. Just to give you more of an insight into what we actually need to do, the level of investment we need to make to be able to achieve our objectives. Okay, and finally, what is that objective? Well, would it be reasonable for us to achieve a World Cup here in 2023? Is it achievable for us to be able to achieve a 50-50 participation rate between men and women by that point in time? We think it is, and we'll be applying ourselves and doing all we can to try and do that, along with our colleagues and partners at the FFA and with government, of course, in clubland, critically in clubland where it really matters. So finally, I'd just like to thank my colleagues and staff. So if you have any questions, please ask my colleagues who are wearing the blue shirts. If you could just raise your hands. Okay, there they are. If you have any questions, please let them know. They'll be more than happy to help you out. Thanks to Alex and Sarah from the FFA and Helen and Vicky from the FFV in particular. Look forward to sharing the next few days with you and, of course, seeing you tonight and on Sunday in Geelong. So thank you very much. Thanks, Stephanie.